Hello and welcome to the channel. Today what we're going to talk about is how you can build your own custom business process tracking alert notification mechanism. So let's go ahead, let's dive right into the content. So for those of you that may be new to business process tracking, we did have a refresh of this offering back in June at the Integrate conference, and we introduced a new feature that allows you to detect a business process stage status. So that means something that's successful or something that has failed. Now, in theory, we also support if something hasn't happened yet either. You'll see a gray box here. But what you do see on the screen here is we've got a series of green stages that have completed successfully, and then we have a red one. The red one represents a failure. So the question is, when that failure does occur, how do I get informed of this? I don't want to be tied to a web browser hitting F5 all day just to be able to figure this out. And so that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. What we're going to do is show a workflow that has been constructed that allows you to, on a recurring basis, go ahead and query your ADX instance looking for business process stage statuses where they have failed. Now, we've talked about this before. ADX, Azure Data Explorer, is our telemetry store for this feature. And this is something that a customer configures when they're using business process tracking. So it's bring your own instance, essentially. Now, we chose ADX for a few reasons. One is it's highly reliable. Two, it's highly scalable. But it also, the data is yours. And this is a great example of when the data is yours, feel free to go ahead and use it through other extensibility mechanisms. So today, we're going to talk about alerts and notification, but you could also build dashboards. That'll be a future video where I explore that some more. But when you do build alerts and notifications and you do use a workflow, as you can imagine, there's a lot of opportunities here. You can orchestrate different processes like ITSM integration. You can go ahead and put messages on a Teams chat. You can go ahead and send email communication. You can also do even more sophisticated things like business process SLA monitoring, where you maybe need to do a more complex query to see if the response time has been within range. Lots of options here. And then today what I'm going to show you is how you can go ahead and look for failures. Now, I will share a link to a GitHub repo where you can go ahead and find this particular workflow. I'll include that in chat here or in the video description. But also, this will be part of our upcoming templates gallery. This is going to be one of the templates that you'll be able to go ahead and provision right from within the Azure portal. So keep your eyes open on that. So let's go ahead and let's head over to a demo. All right, so let's take a quick peek here at the workflow. As I mentioned, I'll include a link to a GitHub repo where you can get the Workflow.json if you're interested in it. But what this is going to do is it's going to run on a recurrence interval. Obviously, you choose the time frame that works best for you. I am in Logic App Standard, so not too concerned about costs because I have the runtime already available to me. Now, naturally, when you do these types of polling scenarios, you always need to go ahead and store the timestamp of the last time that this workflow ran. And as a result, I'm just going to use table storage here in order to go ahead and achieve this. Now, the table storage scheme is very simple, right? You've got the default values, partition key, row key, timestamp, and then I created a new timestamp column where I just captured the last time that this ran. And so basically, any new alerts that come in after this timestamp should get picked up and processed by that workflow. So I could pose the latest timestamp right after that. I'm just going to go ahead and get that value because I'm going to use that when I construct a query. And it's a quite simple query. It's I've got the Custo table name. This is set up as a parameter. As I mentioned, this is going to be part of our template suite, so it'll be easy for you to adopt. Then just looking for timestamps descending and looking where event status is equal to failure and timestamp is greater than basically the timestamp from table storage. Now, we'll go ahead and run that query using the Custo connector. So we need to provide our cluster, our database name, and our query for this to go ahead and run. Now, I won't show that actually because then I'll expose all my details. But yeah, you'll go to your Custo instance, go to the overview page. You'll be able to find this information. Now, you might be interested in, okay, what is the data that is collected inside of Custo? So this is a sample message And there's a few sample messages here, but what you can see is we've got kind of just some base information. Like this is going to be very consistent across all events, where you've got a correlation ID. This is basically your transaction ID, the name of your stage, safety check, the status, failure or succeeded, the timestamp, and then basically just a unique ID. This is going to be untyped, so whatever data that you've configured in business process tracking to go ahead and collect will show up here. So this is basically just a list of it. And then this is where we're going to get additional metadata. So the name of the logic app, the name of the business process. This is more of an internal value that we use for tracking changes between a business process. The name of the tracking profile that would have emitted this data, and some additional IDs related to that. The name of the workflow, so that's obviously quite important. And then also we've got some additional IDs, and this is going to be quite interesting for us. This is basically the run instance. So we can use this value to query inside of run history to go ahead and find a particular workflow. You might see this is copied here, but if someone had flowed a client tracking ID into this workflow, that would also be captured here as well. So this is going to be just duplicative. These are just other events, but I thought it was just interesting to show the type of data that we do collect inside of the business process tracking data store. All right, so we're going to call that query. We're going to then get the response. That's where I've taken that sample message. I've used it to generate a schema. Now we've got a typed message that we can further use inside of the workflow itself. Now here I want to capture the current timestamp. So at this point we know the query has executed. So we want to grab a timestamp basically as close to that as possible so that we can go ahead and store that back in that Azure table storage, and then we don't we don't have duplicate messages. So I'm capturing it here just because this could take some time to process, and I want to make sure that I'm not having overlap between new events that could be coming in. So this is going to return all of those failed records. And now what we want to do, and this is kind of optional in my mind, I thought it would be quite useful to see, okay, so if I've got a failed stage, show me the remaining stages for that particular business process. And so that's what we're going to go here. We're going to go and get the details, and we're basically just going to go ahead and look for additional records based upon that correlation ID, because that should be a unique value. We'll then go ahead and call Custo and basically get that information. Now here I've decided to use the data mapper. I want to be able to just create a smaller basically message. Let me just show you what that looks like. So nothing too crazy, but let's just show this. Here I technically have a lot of additional values here, different properties, and I'm not interested in reporting on all of those. And so that's where I need to go ahead and do some level of restriction. Here I'm using just the data mapper to go grab these three fields: the stage, the status, the date, time, doing some manipulation with some functions. And that's why I'm using data mapper, because I felt that was simpler and was actually faster. Initially I had a loop where I would go ahead and append and basically create my own message. And this was actually much, much faster than the looping. So that's why I also went with the data mapper route. Okay, then what I'm going to do is take that transformed output from the data mapper. We've got those three values, right? And I'm going to just use this create HTML table from it and pass in that body, that message body. Now, I'm not doing anything with the columns. I'm just using like the automatic here. So not doing anything special there. And then when I go ahead and post this to Teams, this is where I can go ahead and include both the initial data. So this would represent the failed business process and its related data. And here I'm using a bunch of expressions and things like that. So copying the Workflow.json should be quite productive for you here. And then the other thing I do here, this is going to grab that HTML table. And this is going to show me sort of the successful, or I guess the other events that participated in that business process. Once I've posted that message, then I'm going to go ahead and update the table entity. And I'm going to use that last, this timestamp that was captured up here. because at this point I know it was successful, so I want to go ahead and include it in the update. If one of these things happened to fail, we wouldn't want to update it because then we would miss a record. So that's why we do this at the very end. And then just for some hygiene, I've got a scope, a catch. If there's any sort of errors that take place while this is running, I just go ahead and put that into the Teams channel as well. So let's go ahead and see this run. I'm going to just update this, this timestamp here, just so I don't have to replay everything. I'm going to set this to be, yeah, that should work. Oh, okay, so this had run subsequently. So let me just do this again. So, oh no, that's 7. Yeah, no, that's right. That's okay. And then we can go back over, and this might have kicked off already because I just got a new Teams notification, but let's just double check here. 4:23. So this just ran actually, and it took 5 seconds. And the output is this. So 4:23. We now have like the name of the business process, the ticket number, the stage name, at what time this took place, the fact that it did fail, the logic app that hosted this, the workflow that processed this, the run instance ID that, the workflow that, processed this information as well. And so if we wanted to go into run history, we can copy and paste this into run history and then search for this exact execution. This is that sort of property bag. So this is, if there was more data collected, it would show up here, put some additional information about the failure. And then here's that summary. So I've assorted these basically in order, and we can see that we created a ticket, created the work order, dispatched, technician was on site, closed the work order. That was all successful. And then we get into this part here where we had a safety check, which failed. And then we had some other steps that were also successful. This here, you can go ahead and tweak. This is here to inspire people. And I think there's some value in giving you some customization. What's interesting, when I was talking to a colleague and showing them this, they're one of the engineers on the project, they said, the flow itself, the workflow itself is actually very like boilerplate. Really all you need to do here is, if you want to go after different sort of use cases, all you're going to do is change your queries. But the response coming from Kusto is going to be exactly the same, for ADX rather. So from that perspective, this should be quite reusable and meet many of your needs. So that's the video. Thanks for checking it out. And yeah, look for this soon in the template gallery. Otherwise, look for the Workflow.json in the description of this video. I'll include to the repo where you can go ahead and find it. All right, thanks.